This video is sponsored by WarThunder. 26 entries, 5 tiers. From Nazi America and the collapse of Europe to alien invaders crashing World War II. These are the strangest, wildest, and most disturbing alternate histories ever imagined. Tier 1. Mainstream What-Ifs. The Man in the High Castle. Imagine waking up in America, but it's not America anymore. California is now basically Tokyo 2.0, while New York has become an evil villain lair under Nazi rule. The year is 1962, and this is the world of The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick. In this timeline, World War II ended differently. Germany and Japan won the war in 1947. The United States no longer exists as one nation, and it's been divided. On the West Coast, now called the Pacific States of America, life seems quiet on the surface. Japanese officials run things smoothly, polite but oppressive, like a passive-aggressive Reddit mod. American life is reduced to black market collectibles like comic books, Zippos, old-school guns. Little pieces of nostalgia from a country that basically doesn't exist anymore. On the East Coast, things are darker. The Nazis rule with an iron grip. Strict racial laws means Jews and black Americans have fled, vanished, or live in hiding. The Nazis have built terrifying technology. Rocket planes, nukes, even colonies in space. They drained the Mediterranean Sea to create new farmland. Hitler is still alive, but he's gone full Kanye on Twitter levels of unhinged. Now the Nazi leadership is scheming to take his place. Between these two superpowers is the Rocky Mountain Neutral Zone, a fragile space where Americans can breathe a little freer. But the tension is still high. A secret book, The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, quietly spreads through the population. It tells of a world where the Allies won the war, written by a mysterious author, Hawthorne Abdenson, aka The Man in the High Castle. This book gives people under occupation both hope and doubt. They begin to wonder which reality is real. So how did this alternate history happen? It started with the assassination of Franklin Roosevelt in 1933. Without him, America stayed out of World War II too long. Germany crushed Britain and the Soviet Union. Japan hit Pearl Harbor harder than in our timeline, and wiping out the entire Pacific Fleet. They invaded Hawaii, Australia, and California. Germany attacked from the east, so America, unable to defend two fronts, surrendered in 1947. But the novel isn't about battles or generals. It's about ordinary people trying to live under foreign rule. While some choose to collaborate, others resisted in quiet ways. There are shopkeepers, antique dealers, smugglers of forbidden books. The world feels eerily real. Americans learn Japanese customs to survive. Old American songs are kept alive in secret. There's also a mystical thread. Characters use the I Ching, an ancient Chinese oracle, to guide their choices. Even Philip K. Dick used the I Ching to shape the story, making the plot feel like fate is deciding what comes next. In time, some characters wonder, is Abdenson's book the true history, or is their own world an illusion? The Man in the High Castle isn't just about war or politics. It's about how ordinary people survive without freedom, and how fragile the world we know really is. But Nazi victory scenarios aren't just limited to divided America and mysterious books. There's a whole subgenre of what if Germany won alternate histories, and some of them take things way further than you'd expect. For example, there's another timeline where Germany doesn't take the USA, but it basically turns all of Europe into one giant Nazi superstate. New capital, new rules, new Cold War. The stakes are different, but the atmosphere is just as intense. Fatherland. Alright, so once again Hitler wins, but this time it's not quite game over for the USA. It's 1964. Berlin's throwing a massive party for Adolf's 75th birthday, and Europe is basically one gigantic Nazi empire. Welcome to Fatherland, which, if you haven't read it, is this super intense alternate history thriller by Robert Harris that will absolutely mess with your brain. In this alternate history, Germany didn't just win the war, it reshaped Europe completely. Most European countries are either part of the German Empire or controlled by puppet governments loyal to Berlin. Eastern Europe is now divided into German colonies called Reich Commissariats. Western European countries still exist, but they answer directly to Germany. Britain lost the war and now lives under Nazi influence, with King Edward VIII, who historically abdicated, placed back on the throne as a Nazi-friendly king. The British royal family, along with Winston Churchill, escaped to Canada. Germany's only major rival is the United States. America never invaded Europe and instead made peace after Germany demonstrated powerful long-range rockets over New York City. Now the world is divided into a tense Cold War between Germany and the United States, with each nation possessing nuclear weapons. The main character of the story is Xavier March, a detective working for the Nazi police in Berlin. March gets pulled into what seems like a simple murder mystery, but suddenly he's knee-deep in a conspiracy with dead Nazis popping up left and right. As he digs deeper, March realizes they're connected to a dark secret the Nazi government wants to hide at all costs. Germany in 1964 looks impressive on the outside. Berlin has become a grand, monumental city built by Hitler's favorite architect, Albert Speer. There's advanced technology like jet planes, television, and modern cars. But behind this polished facade is a brutal police state. The Gestapo watches everyone closely, and children are raised to be loyal Nazis. March's own son is part of the Hitler Youth, and fully believes the regime's propaganda. One of the darkest secrets in this alternate timeline is the Holocaust. Officially, the Nazis claim the Jews were simply resettled in Eastern Europe. Most people prefer not to question further, but March discovers proof of what really happened. The Holocaust wasn't resettlement, it was mass murder. Now, the government is desperately trying to erase any evidence of their crimes. The story unfolds like a tense detective thriller. Originally, March was loyal to the regime, but he became increasingly disillusioned, slowly realizing the depth of the Nazis' evil. But Germany winning World War II isn't the only way history can flip. There's another timeline where Germany didn't just win the second round, it won the first, and the entire world ended up on a totally different path because of it. KAISERREICH, Legacy of the WELKRIEG. It's still Germany, but this isn't your grandpa's World War. It's your grandpa's dad's war. It's 1936, and Europe looks completely different. Germany is the dominant power, and many of the empires from before the war still exist. This is the setting of KAISERREICH, Legacy of the WELKRIEG, originally created as a popular mod for the video game Hearts of Iron. In this alternate timeline, World War I ended with a German victory in 1919. Instead of collapsing, Germany became stronger and more influential. In Europe, Germany created a huge alliance system called the Reichspakt, which controls most of Central and Eastern Europe. Austria-Hungary also survived the war, though it struggles to maintain unity among its many ethnic groups. The Ottoman Empire still exists, ruling parts of the Middle East, but is weak and unstable. The losing nations, France and Britain, form socialist states in the Third Internationale. Italy is divided, with only the Northern Syndicate joining. These countries hope to spread workers' revolutions across the globe. This creates a tense standoff between Germany's conservative monarchies and the socialist nations. Meanwhile, the exiled British and French governments in Canada and North Africa want to retake their homelands. In America, things have gone very wrong. The United States faces a severe economic crisis even worse than the Great Depression. The country is split between three powerful factions. The industrial Northeast falls to the syndicalist labor unions. The South is taken over by populist nationalists under figures like Huey Long, and the weakened federal government trying to hold everything together. Even the West Coast might break away as the Pacific States of America. By 1937, the US could erupt into a second civil war. Russia also took a very different path. After losing World War I, it collapsed into a long, chaotic civil war. By 1936, Russia has no strong communist government like in our real history. Instead, it's divided and weak, led by a restored Tsar or a military leader. Russia wants to regain lost territories from Germany and create another potential conflict. Asia isn't stable either. Japan used the chaos in Europe to expand aggressively and capturing former European colonies in the Pacific and China. Now, Japan is building a huge empire called the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere. This puts Japan on a collision course with Germany, which still holds colonies in Asia. In India, British control is crumbling, leading to rebellions and the possibility of new independent nations emerging. The world is filled with different political ideologies like syndicalism, worker-run socialism, totalism, authoritarian socialism, traditional monarchies, and more. Historical figures appear in unexpected roles. Winston Churchill, for instance, might just be in exile in Canada. Famous Americans like Huey Long led powerful political movements at home. What makes KAISERREICH special is its incredible detail and realism. This alternate history doesn't focus on one simple story. Instead, it offers many possible stories that players can explore in the game. Alright, enough of Germany for now. What if, instead of Europe breaking reality, it was America that took a wrong turn? What if the US picked the exact wrong leader at the worst possible time? And it wasn't some random nobody, but a national hero who smiled for the cameras and shook hands with Hitler. The plot against America. And yep, that's exactly what happens in the plot against America. Alright, it's 1940, and America elects Charles Lindbergh as president instead of Franklin Roosevelt, the airplane guy, the one who flew solo across the Atlantic and shook hands a little too warmly with Hitler. So Lindbergh wins on a promise to keep America out of another messy European war, and everyone just nods along because, let's face it, staying at home sounds way better than fighting Nazis overseas. He signs treaties with Germany and Japan, basically saying, you do your thing, we'll do ours. At first, nothing feels that different. Breakfast still happens, the radio's still on, everyone's just living their lives. But you can feel things getting weirder, especially if you're Jewish. For example, there's this program called Just Folks, where Jewish kids get shipped off to live with Christian families in rural America, supposedly to make them more American. Now, the whole story is told by a kid named Philip Roth. And by the way, Philip Roth is the actual author, one of America's most famous 20th century writers. Here, he puts himself in the story as a young Jewish kid stuck watching his family and neighbors get pushed around by history. Philip watches his brother come back from one of those weird summer trips, suddenly acting like Kentucky is the promised land. Then things escalate. There's a government plan called Homestead 42 that basically forces entire Jewish families to move out of their neighborhoods and scatter across random small towns to assimilate. Philip's relatives get sent to places they've never even heard of. Meanwhile, Lindbergh stacks his administration with names like Henry Ford, yes, the automaker, but also a notorious anti-Semite. So, with guys like that in charge, anti-Semitism spreads fast. Then there's Walter Winchell, a Jewish radio host who refuses to play along with Lindbergh. Naturally, he loses his job. He keeps going anyway, starts making speeches to big crowds, trying to wake people up. It doesn't end well. Winchell gets assassinated, riots break out, Jewish neighborhoods get trashed. Finally, things go completely off the rails when Lindbergh himself disappears mid-flight. Just gone. No crash site, no ransom note, nothing. Immediately, Nazis announce it's obviously a Jewish conspiracy, because of course they do. Vice President Wheeler panics and declares martial law. People, including some Jewish teachers who previously backed Lindbergh, start getting arrested. Things are one step away from civil war. Thankfully, America hits the brakes before completely going off a cliff. Lindbergh's wife makes a desperate public appeal. The country calms down a little, and a quick emergency election brings Roosevelt back into office. Soon afterward, Pearl Harbor happens. America finally joins the war and pretends the last 2 years were just a bad dream. Here's what makes this alternate reality so uncomfortable. It feels entirely believable. Roth doesn't bother with big dramatic battles or secret agents. He just shows how easily democracy can be manipulated, how prejudice spreads when leaders quietly encourage it. But not every strange America involves Nazis. In Tier 2, we have 2 scenarios where USA never exists. Why? Because America never had a revolution. Tier 2. Alternate World History. Roma Eterna. So here's the question, what if the Roman Empire never collapsed? That's the world of Roma Eterna, where we still read Latin and emperors are still arguing over the best way to run an empire the size of a small planet. It starts with a single change. The Israelites never escaped from Egypt, which means there's no Christianity, no Islam, and well, let's just say a lot fewer religious holidays on the calendar. Rome, without any big monotheistic movements to disrupt things, stays focused, and for once, avoids tripping over its own sandal straps. By the year 1282 AUC, that's ab urbe condita, from the founding of the city, Rome still stands, stubborn as ever. Emperors still hold power, but now they have all the headaches of a modern bureaucracy and none of the help from the internet. Rome covers Europe, North Africa, and big chunks of the Middle East. Greek and Egyptian provinces are still part of the empire, and every once in a while, someone dreams of conquering those wild lands up north. But honestly, most of the time, they're just stuck in meetings, usually arguing about money, policy, or who gets credit for some new aqueduct. Of course, 2,000 years is a long time for any government to keep it together. The empire has its ups and downs, civil wars, assassinations, revolts. Basically, business as usual for Rome. But every time things fall apart, the empire stubbornly patches itself up and carries on. You'd think someone would eventually get tired of all the marching, but nope. Legions keep marching. Provinces keep grumbling. and the city of Rome keeps pretending it's still the center of the universe. Now, what's it actually like for regular people? If you luck out, you live in a marble city, drowning in statues and politics. If not, you're out in the sticks, farming olives and griping about the latest imperial nonsense. Slavery never really goes away, because why mess with a system that's been working for centuries? And tech? It's slow. Sure, the Romans figured out printing, gunpowder, and even played with steam engines, but there's no spark for real revolutions. Everything's just a bit stagnant. No internet, no democracy, and don't even dream about texting. Science is mostly plumbing upgrades or new tax loopholes. The Senate still likes to argue about everything, and every emperor has at least one relative who thinks they could do a better job. What about the rest of the world? There's no rise of Islam, no crusades, no European kingdoms breaking away to start their own drama. The Americans are just rumors, and China does its thing without much interference. Rome occasionally sends expeditions out east, but mostly, the empire looks inward. After all, when you already own half the world, ambition gets a little boring. Emperors come and go, sometimes in very creative and unhealthy ways. Every so often, a new religion or a new philosophy pops up, but nothing ever shakes the empire completely. But what if a civilization didn't get that chance? What if instead of limping along for thousands of years, it just vanished? There's an alternate history where Europe didn't stick around to argue about taxes or build steam engines. It got wiped off the map, and that changes everything. The years of rice and salt. Imagine the Black Death rolling through Europe. But this time, it's not just taking a third of the population. It wipes out 99% of everyone. Yes, really. No more kings, no queens, no Renaissance, no Shakespeare, no European history because, well, there's almost no Europe left. That's the setup for The Years of Rice and Salt by Kim Stanley Robinson. In this world, the center of history moves to the east and south. China and the Islamic world become the big players. Europe is mostly a ghost continent with empty villages, silent cities, and the occasional lost traveler wandering the ruins, wondering what civilization even looked like. So, after the plague dust settles in, Muslim armies show up, see all that prime real estate, and start settling in. Later, Chinese explorers show up too, planting their own flags. The result? Europe gets colonized by outsiders for a change. When people finally repopulate the place, they don't speak French, German, or English. They speak Arabic and Chinese. Cathedrals turn into mosques and temples. The old countries become new provinces in much larger empires. There are familiar inventions, gunpowder, printing, ships that can cross oceans, but the context is totally different. The scientific revolution is led by Chinese and Muslim thinkers. The calendar isn't counting from the birth of Christ. It's based on the Islamic calendar because Christianity just disappears, a footnote in the ruins. The story doesn't follow one hero. Instead, it tracks a handful of souls as they're reincarnated, lifetime after lifetime, across centuries. One lifetime, you're a scholar in a Chinese university, arguing about philosophy. Next, you're a Sufi explorer, wandering the empty forests of what used to be France. People in this timeline still fight over borders, argue about religion, and try to build utopias, only to watch them crumble like everyone else's. The big wars are between the Chinese, the Ottomans, the Persians, and the Indians. The great debates aren't about popes and kings. They're about the soul, the afterlife, and the best way to run a society without turning it into a mess. The Age of Discovery sends fleets west, looking for new lands across the Atlantic. But it's not Columbus or Magellan leading the charge. Robinson's book loves asking big questions. What does history look like if the script is flipped? Who would invent the steam engine? Or write the great novels? Or even build the first atomic bomb? Spoiler, someone always figures out how to blow things up. Now, there's an even crazier Black Death erases Europe scenario coming up in Tier 3. Where not only is Europe weakened, it disappears from the story entirely, and the rest of the world has to reimagine history without it. The Two Georges. This is the late 20th century, but the United States doesn't exist. No revolution, no declaration, no founding fathers getting all dramatic in wigs. Instead, North America is just another very large piece of the British Empire. Welcome to The Two Georges, an alternate history by Harry Turtledove and Richard Dreyfuss. So, in this timeline, Washington and King George III actually sat down and hashed it out. No gunpowder, just a gentleman's handshake and a lot of British understatement. So the result is America stayed under British rule and developed into a peaceful dominion, kind of like Canada, but with warmer weather and more hamburgers. Jump ahead to the 1990s and you're living in a British dominion with steam cars, polite conversation, and more tea shops than actual coffee. The Governor General's in charge, but real power is thousands of miles away. buried under royal paperwork in London. People drive steam-powered cars because apparently internal combustion engines never caught on. On the surface, everything seems proper and almost boring. But, that's just the top layer. Scratch a little deeper and the cracks start to show, like racial tension, class resentment, and the low-key surveillance that keeps the peace. There's a small group of revolutionaries calling themselves the Sons of Liberty. They want full independence from Britain. Most people see them as troublemakers or terrorists, depending on how British you're feeling that day. The plot kicks off when a famous painting called The Two Georges gets stolen. The painting shows that crucial moment when George Washington and King George III agreed not to fight. It symbolizes the peaceful union between America and Britain, so naturally someone stealing it is kind of a big deal. That's where Colonel Thomas Bushell comes in, a world-weary detective who's sick of tea and pretending everything's fine. Bushell investigates the theft and soon finds himself tangled up in political conspiracies. The Sons of Liberty are prime suspects, because subtlety isn't exactly their thing. But Bushell discovers that the real story is even messier. Powerful people from both sides of the Atlantic seem involved, like politicians, business leaders, and maybe even someone from the royal family. The deeper Bushell goes, the clearer it becomes that stealing the painting isn't just symbolic. It's meant to break the trust between Britain and its American colony. Maybe even spark another revolutionary attempt. No pressure, right? To make matters worse, the detective has to navigate stubborn colonial governors, skeptical London officials, and fellow cops who would rather sweep everything under the rug than admit they have a real problem. In the end, The Two Georges isn't just about a stolen painting. It's about how peace is nice, but when you're always being told to sit down and behave, you start to wonder what you've lost. But hey, maybe being politely ruled from afar has its perks. After all, the tea is fantastic. But what if America did try to break free and lost terribly? For want of a nail. Here's a simple twist. What if George Washington had gotten crushed and the American Revolution failed? That's the idea behind Robert Sobel's For Want of a Nail. The story starts after the Battle of Saratoga, where the American rebels lose badly. Their armies collapse, their leaders scatter, and the British round up the stragglers. No Declaration of Independence, no new nation, just a bunch of wanted posters with Thomas Jefferson's face on them. Most of the rebels head south, crossing the border into Spanish-controlled Mexico. British North America, or what we'd call Canada, and the 13 colonies stay together under British rule. Instead of breaking up, the empire doubles down. The loyalists flock in from everywhere, trying to avoid the next revolution. Big names from history, like Hamilton, Adams, and even Benedict Arnold, either vanish into exile or fade into unhappy obscurity. But here's where it gets interesting. The rebels hiding in Mexico start their own country, the United States of Mexico. It's kind of like the United States, but always wanting to prove they're better than the British. The USM grows fast and then takes land from Mexico and the Caribbean, builds railroads, makes new laws, and fights its own wars. Meanwhile, up north, the British territories become the Confederation of North America, or CNA. The CNA still has the king or queen on money, but slowly becomes its own thing. They build cities, factories, and over time, stop listening to London. They industrialize fast, develop big cities, and eventually cut the cord from London, but without the fireworks or fancy speeches. There's still a king or queen on the money, but nobody's sending taxes from across the Atlantic anymore. The USM and CNA don't get along. The CNA is stable, slow to change, and careful about reform. The USM is bold, risky, and loves experimenting with new ideas, even if it sometimes blows up in their faces. If you live in this world, you're always feeling the rivalry. The arms race is more than just weapons. It's about who's got the better way of life. No American dream here, just two countries always trying to outdo each other. Slavery? That's a big deal too. The USM bans it early to look good, while the British CNA waits a lot longer. Both sides use this to brag and pick fights. Globally, things are also different. There's no United States as a superpower, so the world's alliances and balance are all mixed up. People in both countries feel the tension, always wondering which side has it right and what their future will look like. So instead of USA versus Soviet, you get a sibling fight of CNA versus USM. But what if Africa was the one sending out ships, planting flags, and running the colonial show? History books are fun, but blowing stuff up yourself? Bit more satisfying. Enter War Thunder, today's sponsor. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, and you can play it for free right now on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or the brand new mobile version for iOS and Android. The game puts you in command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, ships, and helicopters from 10 nations across 100 years of military history, from 1920s biplanes to modern fighter jets and main battle tanks. And these aren't just pixel boxes with hit points. Every vehicle is modeled down to its individual components, engine, crew, fuel lines, ammo, all of it vulnerable. When you land a shot, you'll see exactly how it hit in X-ray view, which part it pierced, which crew member you just ruined, and how it all came apart. The destruction physics are, frankly, a little too satisfying. You also have to think, plan, and adapt fast. Otherwise, it's easy to become the one getting blown to pieces. There's a mode for every kind of player, from fast-paced arcade to hardcore simulator where physics doesn't forgive you. Customize your vehicle with historical camo, community-made decals, and yes, you can run all this with just a mouse and keyboard. No fancy gear needed. It's fully optimized, runs smooth on lower-end PCs, and still looks fantastic. And right now, new or returning players, if you haven't logged in for 6 months on PC or consoles, can get a massive free bonus pack using my links in the pinned comment or video description. 3 premium vehicles, the exclusive Eagle of Valor decorator, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of premium account time. It's available for a limited time only, so don't miss it. Just use my links in the pinned comment or video description to start playing today. Now back to the video. Lion's blood. So here's the twist. Imagine if Africa, not Europe, ran the world. That's the setup for Lion's Blood by Stephen Barnes. Instead of Europeans crossing oceans and taking over continents, it's African empires sailing west, building colonies, and putting white Europeans in chains. Europe never bounces back from the Dark Ages. While those kingdoms are stuck fighting and starving, African powers like Egypt, Mali, and Ethiopia take off. They're the ones pushing science, building cities, and setting sail for the new world. When they arrive, they bring their religion, their tech, and their slave trade. This brings us to Bilalistan, a rich Muslim colony along the Gulf Coast of North America. You get elegant mosques, green plantations, and ports packed with traders. African culture runs the show. Arabic is everywhere, and the ruling class is all African. The most interesting part is the people doing the hard labor in the fields are pale-skinned northerners, mostly Irish, English, or Scandinavian. Now, here's where it gets personal. The story centers on Aidan O'Dear, a young Irish kid who's captured and sold after a raid on his village. He's shipped to Bilalistan and bought by Abu Ali Jalaluddin, a wealthy African scholar. Abu Ali has a son, Kai, who is about Aidan's age. And this is where the story really gets good. Aidan and Kai grow up side by side. One's the son of the owner, one is the property. They eat together, study together, and sometimes even laugh together. Their friendship is close but never equal. There's always a line between free and enslaved. As they get older, Aidan sees how complicated the world is. African society is rich and high-tech, but the same people coding poetry and building libraries also run the slave markets. Some Africans want justice and fairness. Others simply don't care. Power is power. The story ran through rebellions, escapes, and betrayals until it all comes crashing down on Aidan and Kai, and both boys are forced to pick sides. The book never pretends that slavery is anything but brutal, no matter whose neck is under the boot. Barnes digs into the idea that power can twist anyone, and history is full of people convincing themselves that cruelty is just how things are. There's no neat, happy ending. The world might look elegant on the outside, but inside, everyone's trapped by history. Aztec Century. Now let's try a different twist. What if the Aztec Empire never fell, and instead took over the world? That's a setup in Aztec Century by Christopher Evans. Here, European powers don't conquer the Americas. Instead, centuries later, it's the Aztecs sailing east, invading Europe, and setting themselves up as the new superpower. By the late 21st century, the Aztec Empire is the planet's leading nation. Forget the old stories about Montezuma getting tricked by the Spanish. This time, it's the British who get conquered. The story starts with England under Aztec rule. The once mighty British are now second-class citizens in their own country. London has pyramids on the skyline and Aztec-style markets on every corner. Aztec soldiers patrol the streets, and English kids learn Nahuatl at school. If you want to get anywhere in life, you have to act more Aztec than the Aztecs themselves. The main character is Victoria, a British aristocrat. Her family has lost their land and status, but still remembers the old days like tea, stiff upper lips, that sort of thing. Victoria is chosen for a very special honor. She's to be taken to the Aztec capital Tenochtitlan as a hostage. The Aztecs use hostages from conquered lands as a way to keep people loyal back home. It's a little like being sent off to boarding school, except this time, if your family rebels, you might not be coming back. Tenochtitlan is now a futuristic megacity. stretching out over miles of lakes and canals, filled with towers, temples, and endless traffic. The Aztecs have blended their old traditions, yes, including the scary ones, with advanced science and technology. Rituals and religions still matter a lot. Sacrifice remains a dark part of public life, used to show the power of the empire and keep everyone in line. It's not some Hunger Games TV show, but you'd definitely rather not get picked. Life for the British in the empire is a constant negotiation. Some adapt, some rebel, most just try to survive. The Aztecs run everything with a strange mix of bureaucracy and tradition. They take notes on everything, from the number of birds in the market to the loyalty of their foreign hostages. The empire is strong, but never as stable as it looks. Old British resistance groups dream of independence, but most end up squashed before they get very far. Her journey is about survival, but also about understanding. What makes an empire strong? What makes it fall apart? And how do you keep your identity when your entire world has been turned upside down? The story doesn't offer easy answers. The Aztecs aren't cartoon villains. They're clever, ruthless, and deeply proud of their traditions. The British aren't pure victims either. History, as always, is messier than anyone wants to admit. Now we have one more scenario where the great civilization doesn't come from Europe. Welcome to Australia, the lands of red and gold. Here's a change you probably never thought about. What if the native people of Australia invented their own civilization with farming and advanced tech long before anyone from Europe even knew it existed? That's the world in the lands of red and gold. This is a fan alternate history brainstormed by Jared Kavanagh in online discussions, then expanded by his fans. Instead of kangaroos and empty deserts, you get busy cities, rice paddies, and local kings. It all starts with a simple plant called the firegrass. In our timeline, firegrass is just an annoying weed that burns easily. In this story, it becomes the key to everything. People in southwestern Australia figured out how to farm it thousands of years ago. Farming leads to more food, and more food means bigger communities, cities, writing, and eventually organized states. Firegrass is more than just food. It's used as fuel for ovens, and even for powering boats that can travel long distances. Australians developed advanced watercraft, like multi-hulled catamarans that give them a real edge at sea. Their own writing systems help them keep track of law, trade, and even astronomical observations. And their scholars are experts at mapping the southern sky, which makes navigation and exploration a science in itself. By the time European explorers finally show up, Australia isn't some empty continent. It's full of powerful kingdoms, trade routes, and armies. There are scholars, inventors, and rulers who know how to make deals with outsiders. The British and Dutch can't just plant a flag and call it a day. Instead, they have to send diplomats and learn the local languages, hoping not to get embarrassed at the negotiating table. All this means the world's trade routes and balance of power gets rewritten. Spices, gold, and new tech flow out of Australia, and Europeans now have to respect a new civilization that doesn't look, act, or think like them. But still, inside Australia, things aren't always peaceful. Kingdoms rise and fall, and wars still happen. Religion, politics, and science clash, just like anywhere else. This alternate timeline asks a simple question. What happens if history gives you just one different crop? Sometimes that's all it takes to turn the ends of the earth into the center of the map. Tier 3. Apocalypse Scenarios. The Peshawar Lancers. Imagine if the world changed overnight. Not because of war or sickness, but because giant rocks fell from the sky. That's what happens in the Peshawar Lancers. In 1878, a devastating meteor shower hits Europe and North America. The cities are obliterated. Farmlands turn to ash, and what's left is endless winter. Survival is nearly impossible. With Britain on the edge of extinction with starvation and freezing cold, Queen Victoria orders a desperate evacuation. The British government, the royal family, and whoever they can save escape to warmer colonies in India, Australia, and South Africa. Britain itself becomes a dead, frozen wasteland. But the British Empire survives by moving its heart to India. Fast forward to 2025, the British Empire rules from India, with half the world's population living under its control. Their society is a strange mix of old British traditions and Indian influences. People might sip tea and dress like Victorians, but they eat Indian food, use local languages, and ride steam trains or airships. The technology is a mashup of ours. There are mechanical computers and flying machines, but no digital revolution, no internet, and no modern cars. Europe and North America are almost empty. The survivors are scattered in ruins, hunting and scraping by. Some of these groups even resort to cannibalism to survive. Russia also collapses completely. The power that survives moves to Central Asia, where the ruling elite is shown as brutal, paranoid, and heavily influenced by apocalyptic cults. These cults are dangerous, but they're not the mainstream. They're fringe, brutal groups that add a real threat to the story. Japan comes out of the disaster strong and built its own empire across East Asia and the Pacific, even settling in parts of North America. In the Middle East, a new caliphate rises and is constantly fighting with British and French forces. France barely survives by relocating to North Africa and always hoping for a comeback. For regular people, the stakes are real. Anyone in the core of the empire might find themselves in a weird blend of tea parties and Indian festivals. Their problem is mostly about class and traditions clashing. Outside the empire, it's all about survival, famine, warlords, and dangers from both desperate people and the wild, broken land. But what if instead of meteorites, it was a plague that wiped out Europe and leaving the rest of the world to take over? Next up, a story where Europe becomes an afterthought, and the Aztecs, Ottomans, and Chinese get to run the show. The Gate of Worlds. In the Gate of Worlds, the Black Death doesn't just kill a lot of people in Europe. It kills almost everyone. There aren't enough people left to keep cities running or kingdoms alive. Europe falls apart. Shakespeare, Columbus, the British Empire just never happened. Now, while Europe's busy falling apart, the rest of the world is like, cool, our turn. The Ottoman Empire gets huge. The Aztecs and the Incas go wild in America, building their own superstates because nobody from Europe is there to stop them. China, India, and Africa keep doing their thing too, and trade between Asia and Africa starts to really take off. Anyway, the story itself jumps ahead a few hundred years. You meet this guy, Dan Beauchamp, who's from England. Except, this time, England is just a sleepy farm country now. London's basically a small town. Most English people are farmers or run tiny shops. So if you want any kind of adventure or a real shot at a big life, you have to get out of Europe and head somewhere that actually matters. That's exactly what Dan does. He dreams about Tenochtitlan, what we'd call Mexico City today. In this world, Tenochtitlan is hands down the most exciting place on the planet. We're talking about huge buildings, busy markets, wild inventions, and people coming in from everywhere just to get a piece of the action. When Dan finally gets there, he's shocked. In the Aztec lands, the culture is very different. The people follow their old traditions, but they also use new technology. Everyone speaks Nahuatl, and there are strict rules about how to behave. At first, Dan's totally lost, but after a while, he figures out how things work. Europeans like Dan are kind of nobody in this universe. People see them as backwater hicks. The real power is with the Ottomans, the Aztecs, and the Chinese. So the whole map is flipped. What we usually call Western history is just a side note now. Everybody else gets to write the main story. So, enough natural doomsday scenarios. What would happen to the world from a human-made doomsday scenario? AKA nuclear bombs. 1983, Doomsday. It's November 1983. The Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union is at its peak. There are thousands of nuclear weapons on both sides pointed right at each other. In real life, nothing happened. But in 1983 Doomsday, this one tiny mistake set off the worst disaster in history. It begins with a misunderstanding. NATO runs a military exercise called Able Archer, where Western leaders practice how they'd respond to a nuclear attack. The Soviets, worried that this is not just a drill, get scared. They think it's a trick, and that a real attack is coming. Their leaders panicked and decided to launch their missiles first, just to be safe. Within minutes, the United States and its allies detect the attack and fire back. Nobody hesitates. Nobody gets to call it off. The world's cities turn to fire in less than an hour. The bombs fall everywhere. Washington, D.C., New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles are gone. Moscow, Leningrad, Kiev, Warsaw, East Berlin, and many more are all destroyed. London, Paris, Rome, Tokyo, Beijing, every major city you know is hit. The world map changes in minutes. Hundreds of millions die right away. Buildings vanish. Streets become craters. Anyone close to the blast is killed instantly. But that's just the opening act. The real suffering is what comes next. All those burning cities fill the sky with so much smoke and ash, the sun just blocks out. Welcome to nuclear winter. Summer suddenly feels like January in Siberia. Crops fail, animals die, forests keep burning. Suddenly, billions of people are facing starvation. If you're not starving, you will suffer in other ways. Radiation sickness is common. It can make people bleed, lose hair, and die slowly over weeks or months. Hospitals are gone. Doctors are few. Medicine is rare. Even if you survive the first day, life gets harder every day after. Most leaders are vaporized in the first wave. Local officials try to keep things together, but with barely any food or clean water, it's basically every family for themselves. People escape the cities and roam the countryside looking for anything to eat or anywhere to crash. Some band together and try to rebuild, but others turn to crime, violence, or even form small warlord gangs. A few countries in the southern hemisphere like New Zealand, Argentina, South Africa, and Australia are not directly hit by bombs. They still have farms, some factories, and working governments, so naturally refugees from around the world flood to these places, hoping for safety. But many mouths made the food run short, jobs vanished, and new conflicts started. These countries are forced to close borders or create strict new laws just to survive. Life everywhere becomes a fight for survival. Technology goes backward. With power stations destroyed, most people lose electricity. There are no phones, no internet, no television. People start using old tools, farming by hand, and traveling on foot or by bicycle. Money loses its value. Food, water, medicine, and fuel become more important than gold. 1983 Doomsday is not just a story of destruction. It's about what happens next, how people react, how they help each other, and how new societies slowly begin. But it's also a warning. One small mistake, one moment of fear, and everything familiar can be gone forever. But at least the aftermath of this world nuclear war is normal. What do you mean by normal? Because in the next entry, we crank the radiation 100 times more powerful and create a world full of mutants. Fallout. Imagine a future that never quite left the 1950s, but still more advanced than ours. Nuclear cars, house-cleaning robots, and everyone still drinking soda from glass bottles. It's 2077 and the world is running out of resources. The US, China, Russia, and Europe are all at each other's throats. And after years of tension, it all goes up in mushroom clouds. On October 23, 2077, thousands of nuclear bombs fall. Most of the planet doesn't survive the next 2 hours. But some people are lucky. Or honestly, unlucky enough to hide in massive underground bunkers called vaults. Officially, these vaults are supposed to save the population. In reality, most are just experiments run by Vault-Tec, sometimes with government support, testing everything from group psychology to genetic tweaks. People in the vaults don't have a clue about what's happening on the surface. Above ground, it's a nightmare. Cities are just skeletons. The land is scorched, forests are dead, and dust storms sweep through radioactive deserts. Good luck finding food or water that won't kill you. If the radiation doesn't get you, the mutants might. Giant roaches, two-headed lizards, the walking dead, or any abomination out there. The Fallout story always starts with someone finally leaving a vault and trying to survive the wasteland. Either want to find a family, a mission, or looking to rebuild something out of the ruins. Every day is a gamble. There are raiders, slavers, and all sorts of factions trying to run the show. Like the Brotherhood of Steel hoarding old tech and acting like knights in power armor. Or the Enclave, who claim they're still the real US government, but mostly just made things worse. If you want to live, you build what you can from scraps. People build new towns from scrap metals and broken cars. They trade for food, water, and bullets. Some try to keep old traditions alive. Others invent new ways to live. Law and order are rare. Most places are ruled by whoever is toughest or best armed. But it's not all hopeless. We, as the protagonist Vault Dweller, become heroes, helping others and inspiring new hope. People plant crops, clean the water, and slowly rebuild lost knowledge. The series is full of dark humor and strange stories, like robots who think they're cowboys, towns built inside crashed airplanes, radio DJs broadcasting to anyone who will listen. Play it. It's weirdly cheerful for a nuclear wasteland. But nuclear war isn't the only way the world can freeze over. What if the sun itself started fading and winter never ended? Next, a world where survival means keeping the last city warm no matter the cost. Frostpunk. Think about a world where winter never ends. That's the world of the video game Frostpunk. The sun gets weaker, and suddenly the temperature everywhere drops to deadly lows. Snow covers every city. The seas freeze. Crops die in the fields, and animals disappear. Most of humanity doesn't survive the first year. The story starts in Britain, but the whole country falls apart really quickly. There's no heat, no food, and the government can't help anyone. Factories and houses freeze. Some people stay home and freeze to death, while others panic and fight over food and firewood. But there's a small group of people who come up with a big idea. They decide to build huge coal-powered heaters way up north. These heaters are like giant towers that can warm a whole city. You're put in place as playing as the leader of one of these frozen cities. When you arrive, it's just ice, the wind, and one massive heater. Your first move is to gather whatever you can. Coal to keep the generator running, wood and steel for shelter, and whatever food you can scrounge. Farming is impossible, so you're either hunting, fishing through ice, or growing mushrooms in heated shacks. Every building has to huddle close to the generator's warmth, or people just freeze. If you build too far out, you lose them to sickness or the cold. So every day, you're balancing. Do you put homes, clinics, and soup kitchens near the heat, or try to stretch resources further? But honestly, the real game is in the decisions you make about people. There's never enough food or medicine, so do you feed the kids or the workers? Let the sick rest or force them back to work? Sometimes you have to pass harsh laws like child labor, mass graves, or patrols to keep panic in check. And the weather just keeps getting worse. Every few days, a new snowstorm comes in and makes everything even colder. You run out of coal faster. Machines break. Sometimes you send people out to explore, and maybe they bring back supplies or new people. But sometimes they just don't come back. Hope and order are the only things that keep your city together. If people lose hope, they'll leave or start riots. If you lose control, crime takes over. You can try to make people happier by building a fighting arena, temples, or giving extra food. Or if things get really bad, you can make strict rules and punish people to keep order. Some cities turn into a ruthless regime. Others try to stay kind and faithful. And just when you think you might have a handle on things, the superstorm hits. It's colder than anything before, and even the generator can't save everyone. In the end, survival isn't just about beating the cold. It's about the choices you make as a leader. Who do you save? And what are you willing to sacrifice to keep hope alive? Tier 4, Sci-Fi, 11/22/63. Let's talk about time travel and sometimes how good intentions can make things way worse. So here's the setup. Jake Epping is just an ordinary high school teacher in Maine. His life's nothing special. One day, his friend Al, who owns the local diner, drops tea. There's a door in the pantry that sends you straight back to September 1958. Now, here's how it works. No matter how long you spent in the past, only 2 minutes passes by in the present. But every time you step through that door, the past resets. So if you mess something up, you can go back, walk through again, and everything goes back to how it was. Think of it like hitting restart on a level in a game. For example, if you stop a car accident on one trip, then reset, it's like it never happened. It's a do-over machine, but every choice can wipe out what came before. Anyway, Al's dying, and he wants Jake to finish what he started. Stop Lee Harvey Oswald and save JFK. The theory is saving Kennedy stops the Vietnam War and changes everything for the better. Jake doesn't say yes right away. Instead, he did a test. He tests things out by saving his friend Harry from a family tragedy that disabled him. Jake succeeds, but when he returns to his own time, he finds that Harry's life is actually worse. Harry, no longer disabled, is sent to Vietnam and killed in the war. Turns out, the past doesn't like being changed. The consequences come out sideways. After thinking it over, Jake decides to take the risk. He moves to Texas as George Amberson, teaches school, and falls for Sadie, a local librarian. But behind the scenes, he's tracking Oswald, trying to make sure the guy really is acting alone. King spends a lot of time on the 1950s details, the music, food, cars, and people smoking everywhere. Racism is common, and medicine isn't as advanced. Jake enjoys some of it, but he also knows he doesn't fully belong. He learns the past pushes back against big changes. If you try to change something important, accidents start happening. Like, it'll give you a car crash, sickness, or random things go wrong. This results in Jake almost getting killed several times, and Sadie often gets caught in the crossfire. Finally, Jake gets to November 22, 1963. He stops Oswald and saves Kennedy's life. He's badly hurt, but he makes it back to the time portal and returns to 2011, hoping to find a better world. Nope. Instead, things have gone off the rails. Saving JFK didn't stop the war, it just shifted the mess. The Civil Rights Act never passes. Riots and racism tear the country up. MLK survives, but that doesn't help much. George Wallace becomes president, and Vietnam still happens. Cities get wiped out. Sadie's dead, and the world falls apart. Jake finally realizes what he's done, so he does the only thing left. He resets everything, lets JFK's assassination happen, and walks away for good. Sadie gets to live her life happy, safe, a life well lived, just not with him. Sometimes the best thing you can do is leave the past alone. You try to fix one thing, the whole story falls apart. Now, what if changing the past wasn't just personal? Our next two entries will tell you what if a whole town was thrown into the wrong place at the wrong time. And after that, what if an entire modern navy landed in World War II? 1632. Let's try something wild. What if a small American town from the year 2000 suddenly landed in the middle of 17th century Europe? That's exactly what happens in 1632 by Eric Flint. One moment, the people of Grantville, West Virginia are celebrating a wedding. The next, there's a flash of light, and their whole town, like houses, schools, shops, even the power plant, appears in Germany in the year 1631, during one of the most violent times in history, the 30 Years' War. This is not a friendly neighborhood. The land is full of soldiers, starving peasants, and disease. Armies burn whole villages, and no one is safe from warlords and mercenaries. The people in Grantville figure it out pretty quick. Survive together or die separately, and probably horribly. At first, everyone is shocked and scared. Their phones don't work, the internet is gone, and they have no way to contact the outside world. But soon, they realize they have huge advantages. They've got electricity, antibiotics, automatic rifles, and indoor plumbing. To people in 1631, that's not just magic. It's like witchcraft. Word spreads quickly. Local Germans, both rich and poor, are amazed and confused by the Americans. Some are afraid, but others are curious or even hopeful. The Americans decide they can't just hide and wait for rescue because there is no rescue coming. So they make a plan. They will protect themselves and help their new neighbors at the same time. They set up schools to teach reading and basic science. The doctors run medical clinics and gives antibiotics to plague victims, which saves dozens of lives right off the bat. Factory workers and mechanics get to work rebuilding steam engines and inventing water pumps using local parts. They retool a machine shop to produce flintlock rifles and water wheels. One of the future people, who is a history nerd, helps start a public library and introduces American-style civic debates to the Germans. Even music gets in on the action. In one scene, someone cranks up a boombox at a village festival, blasting Louie Louie. And suddenly, you've got 17th century Germans dancing to classic rock. As for romance, Grantville locals and German newcomers hit it off all over the place. Mike Stearns and Rebecca Abravanel fall in love, and so do several other characters, including a schoolteacher and a wounded German soldier who bond while teaching each other languages. The Americans don't just fight, they turn Grantville into a safe haven. They bring in refugees, teach them about democracy, and set up a town council where women, Jews, and commoners can actually vote. And when enemy armies attack, they use their training and firepower to fight them off using walkie-talkies and semi-automatic rifles. Still, it's not all smooth sailing. Imagine trying to explain electricity to people who think thunder is a sign from God. Or teaching about germs when the leading medical advice is leeches and prayers. Some Americans want to lay low. Others are already arguing about a new constitution and fast-tracking the Enlightenment. They know Europe's about to go through years of hell, wars, famines, plagues. The real question is, can a handful of Americans actually change history? Or is it just going to steamroll them anyway? Or as simple as, if it's you, what would you do? Axis of Time. Here's another time travel story, but instead of just regular townsfolk, it's the military guys and a lot more trouble. Axis of Time by John Birmingham asks, what if a modern naval fleet suddenly landed in the middle of World War II? It's the early 21st century, and an international fleet with American, British, Australian, and Japanese warships are sailing together for a big training exercise. Suddenly, something goes wrong. A top-secret science experiment explodes far away, and a strange energy storm forms in the ocean. Without warning, the entire modern fleet is thrown back in time. When the sailors look around, the world is different. The sky is full of old, slow-moving planes. The other ships are small, noisy, and run on steam. They're in the middle of World War II, right in June 1942, days before the famous Battle of Midway. The sailors from 2021 are shocked. They check their maps, their calendars, their computers. It really is 1942. At the same time, the people of 1942 are even more confused. Imagine seeing a giant ship with planes that land on its deck, firing weapons you've never seen. Modern helicopters and jets look alien to them. The old Navy officers don't trust these strangers, but they also see how strong they are. The modern sailors have the upper hand. They know all the secret plans, every code, every move. Their tech is basically magic. But it's not just the weapons that shake things up. The culture shock is even bigger. Imagine 1940s sailors seeing women in command, like Captain Karen Halabi running an entire warship, or black and Asian officers giving orders on the bridge. They hear slang and jokes they don't get. The modern crew is covered in tattoos, listens to music on Bluetooth speakers, and doesn't care much for ancient rules. Since World War II officers are furious, they complain about women distracting the men, or about race mixing in the mess hall. They gripe about discipline when the newcomers call them out for brutal hazing or casual racism. One World War II chaplain even tries to throw a modern sailor into the brig for blasphemy, only to get shut down by a woman admiral. But it's not all yelling. There are moments of real respect, like when an old battleship captain watches a female officer handle a crisis. Or a group of World War II engineers gets schooled by a 20-something tech from 2021 who rebuilds their radar in a day. Some older sailors start asking questions, wanting to know what happens to their families in the future, or if the war can finally end. Meanwhile, the world's leaders are scrambling. Roosevelt, Churchill, and MacArthur try to make sense of it. Should they trust these time travelers? Should they try to steal their tech? Japan's commanders, on the other hand, are terrified. They know if these newcomers join the Allies, their empire is done. The future fleet faces impossible choices. Share too much and they could change everything for the worse. Hold back and millions might die needlessly. Either way, the timeline is already coming apart. The world spins fast. Battles end before they begin. Alliances shift, and new enemies rise. Newspapers print wild stories about angels of death and miracle ships. Civilians call the newcomers heroes or monsters. The old and new worlds collide, and nobody is ever the same. Personal stories play out too. Some people from 2021 fall in love with people from the past. Others are homesick and just want to go home. Some from 1942 want to learn. Others want things to stay the same. There are betrayals and secrets. Some officers from 2021 disagree about what's right. Some leaders in the past want to use the future tech for their own gain. The story is filled with secret meetings, spy missions, and dangerous mistakes. Cyberpunk 2077. This is the world where your life is determined by gangs and giant corporations. Yep, no government and no ideology. Just profits and violence. The world history splits from ours back in the late 20th century. Europe became a superpower with its own currency, the Eurodollar. America, on the other hand, fell apart. There were drug wars, nuclear disasters, a stock market crash, and so much chaos that by the late 1990s, 1 out of every 4 Americans was homeless. The president was assassinated. Martial law was declared. Any semblance of real power the government had was gone and went straight to the mega corporations. By the 2020s, those corporations, like Arasaka from Japan and Militech from America, became bigger than countries. And the crazy thing is, these mega corporations wage war 4 times. So it's not world wars, but corporate wars. So how's their war? As usual, sabotage, secret hacking, and real battles in city streets. It ended in disaster. In 2022, a nuclear bomb destroyed Arasaka's headquarters right in Night City. The world fell into chaos. The sky turned red from dust and ash, and for years after, it was called the Time of the Red. Now, it's 2077, and the world is high-tech, but broken. If you got money, you can change your body any way you like. Neural chips, robot arms, new eyes, or even a new face. They're called cyberware. People get upgrades at shopping malls or shady back alley clinics called Ripper Docs. Even regular workers might have 2 or 3 implants just to keep up with their jobs. For the poor, these upgrades are a lifeline or a gamble. For the rich, it's a fashion statement or a performance boost. But here's the catch. The more you replace, the less you might feel. Push it too far and your mind will break down. Total cognitive collapse. Lost in your own minds. Digital technology runs everything. Elite hackers, called netrunners, plug their brains straight into the internet. They sneak through the firewalls, battle rogue AIs, and steal secrets for cash. Life in Night City is brutal. The rich live in towers with robot servants and perfect bodies. The poor crowd into metal shacks covered in grime and neon tattoos, hustling for their next meal. Gangs own the streets. Mercenaries work for whoever pays the most. The police can't keep up, and sometimes they don't even try. If you cross the wrong corporation, you could disappear forever. In a nutshell, in this world, technology is everywhere. But instead of making life better, it just makes the gap between rich and poor even wider. You're always on camera. You need an ID to do anything. If you're not careful, a company or an AI might control your whole life, and maybe even your body. Cyberpunk 2077 is weirdly cheerful for such a brutal setting. In Night City, you can be anyone, but staying human is the real challenge. Now, our next 3 entries are my favorites, because this time, the timeline isn't run by humans at all. Well, not Homo sapiens, but by dinosaurs, aliens, and Neanderthals. West of Eden. Now, let's reroute history all the way back to 65 million years ago. West of Eden by Harry Harrison imagines a world where the asteroid misses, and dinosaurs never go extinct. Instead of mammals taking over, the big reptiles keep evolving. Fast forward to their present day, and Earth is unrecognizable. Humans aren't the only species running the show. The story's main stars are the Yilane. Imagine a standing lizard people, as tall as humans, with green skin and long, nimble fingers. The Yilane are brilliant, maybe even a step ahead of us. They talk, build sprawling cities, and master science. But here's the interesting part. Their science is alive. They don't make machines, they grow them. Houses, tools, even boats. All living creatures, shaped and bred for a purpose. Even their weapons are things like giant sea monsters and venomous animals that are controlled like technology. Humans here are called Tanu by the Yilane. They're kinda a newcomer in this world. They're Stone Age survivors from the cold lands. They hunt, fish, and scrape by, never drawing much attention from the lizard overlords. Most Yilane see humans as just clever pests, barely worth a second thought. But that changes fast. When some Yilane tribes start pushing north for resources, they bump into the Tanu and realize these animals actually fight back. Suddenly, it's not just a nuisance, it's a threat. The two sides clash, and what started as a territorial skirmish explodes into a full-blown war for the continent. Here's the heart of it. The Yilane process the world in a totally alien way. Emotions like love, loyalty, or grief don't mean the same thing to them. They see these as confusing and even dangerous distractions. Everything is about order, hierarchy, and survival of the group. For the Yilane, showing too much feeling is a sign of weakness. This makes them brilliant city builders, but totally blind to the chaos and passion that drives humans. Carrick, a young human captured and raised by the Yilane, learns to understand both sides, figuring out their language and customs, and eventually escaping to become the translator between worlds. On the Yilane side, you've got Vainte, a leader who believes her species is destined to rule everything. She's clever, proud, and will do whatever it takes to win. It's a classic collision of cultures, but way more complex than good guys versus bad guys. The humans have to get creative to survive. They invent new weapons, steal Yilane secrets, and fight back in ways their rivals can't predict. Both sides lose friends and family. Both sides are forced to change. This is a story about survival, mistakes, and learning to see the world through someone else's eyes. No one's the hero. No one's a pure villain. Just two species, both desperate to survive, locked in a struggle with no easy answers. So West of Eden asks, what if evolution went another direction? Would humans still end up on top, or would we just be another creature trying not to get crushed? The Neanderthal Parallax. What if Neanderthals never went extinct and built a better world than ours? That's the main idea of the Neanderthal Parallax by Robert J. Sawyer. In our world, modern humans survived, and Neanderthals vanished thousands of years ago. But in this alternate timeline, it's the other way around. Neanderthals, who called themselves Barists, became the planet's dominant species. They skipped cities and swords for a while, but they thrived anyway. Deep forests, megafauna, and zero empires. They developed their own language, art, and social rules that are very different from ours. One day, a scientific experiment goes wrong, and a portal opens up between our world and the Barist world. Ponter Bodit, a Neanderthal physicist, falls through the portal and ends up in our Canada, completely confused by everything he sees. Suddenly, the two Earths are linked, and both sides are about to learn a lot. The differences are huge. The Barists are bigger, stronger, and have better night vision than us. Their world is cleaner, less crowded, and a lot safer. They've got biotech and computers carved into stone. No cities, no waste, no pollution. Just weirdly efficient science and everything built to last. Barists travel in small groups, and everyone has a companion who watches them for safety. Crime is nearly zero because every adult carries a recording device, like a live body cam that tracks where they go and what they do. To the Barists, our world looks like a landfill with Wi-Fi. Our cities are noisy, dirty, and crowded. We waste resources, fight wars, and let some people go hungry while others get rich. The Barists don't even have money. Everything is shared, and no one is ever left out. Families are different too. Neanderthal families switch parents in and out, and kids are raised by the whole group. The story follows Ponter and a human scientist, Mary Vaughan, as they try to understand each other's worlds. There's confusion and awkwardness, but also friendship and even romance. The Barists are curious about our art, religion, and stories. We're amazed by their honesty, their advanced healthcare, and their peace. But the meeting of two worlds isn't easy. Some humans panic. Others see dollar signs. A few just want to study the cavemen like zoo animals. Others want to exploit the portal for science, money, or power. Some Barists want to learn more about us. Others are afraid we'll ruin their world. Big questions come up. Why did humans survive here but not there? Is our way of life better or theirs? Can two very different worlds share knowledge, or will it end in disaster? And what would you do if you met someone who's almost human, but not quite? It's a reminder that we're not always the smartest PCs in the room, just the loudest. A world of difference. Here's a story built on one tiny change. A planet in our solar system is just a bit bigger than it is in real life. In A World of Difference by Harry Turtledove, the fourth planet from the sun isn't Mars, but a world called Minerva. It has an atmosphere, water, and most important, its own intelligent life. The year is 1989, and NASA sends a mission to Minerva. What the astronauts find change everything. Minerva is colder and dimmer than Earth, but it's packed with forests, strange rivers, alien animals, and people. The people of Minerva are called Minervans. They're not humans. They look a bit like big furry centaurs with 4 legs and long arms. Minervans have their own history, language, and technology. They use metal and fire, but their science is far behind Earth's. When the astronauts land, it's the first contact between 2 intelligent species in history. Both sides are curious and a little scared. At first, it's all wonder. Minervans marvel at cameras, radios, and ships that fly without magic. The humans are fascinated by Minervan culture and their strange way of seeing the world. The Minervans see the stars as holes in the sky, and their myths shape how they treat outsiders. But things get complicated fast. The Soviets send their own ship, and soon the Cold War is playing out on Minerva. The US and the USSR exported its rivalries to this alien world. Americans and Soviets start picking tribes, handing out weapons and advice. Suddenly, old rivalries on Minerva get a lot more dangerous. The humans think they can help, but their actions set off a chain of wars and conflicts. The Minervans aren't just bystanders. They have their own politics, their own leaders, and their own ambitions. Some, like the Skarmer leader Reator, see humans as allies to gain an advantage, while others, like the Amalo, view them with suspicion. Minervan society changes almost overnight. New weapons, new diseases like the common cold, which Minervans never faced, and new dreams of power. The story jumps between perspectives. You're with the astronauts and NASA brass, then suddenly you're in the heads of Soviet cosmonauts, or deep inside Minervan clans watching history unravel. Some characters desperately reach for peace, who tries to mediate between clans, while others see only the chance to grab power, settle old scores, or manipulate their new allies. You watch alliances form and fall apart, as real trust slips away and everyone scrambles for advantage. In the end, even good intentions aren't enough to stop the chaos, and Minerva is changed for good, sometimes in ways nobody meant. Tier 5. Wild Fandom Worlds. Red Flood. Red Flood is an alternate history mod for the video game Hearts of Iron 4, where World War I never truly ends, and the result is a world so strange and broken that it makes every other timeline look calm. In this world, the Great War stalls out. The trenches aren't empty, and the fighting just keeps going. By the time it finally stops, the world map looks nothing like ours. Russia has collapsed into total chaos. Instead of one big country, it splits into pieces run by warlords, bandits, and anyone with enough guns to claim a patch of land. No Soviet Union, just endless little wars. Germany, instead of picking a side, splits into 2. One part is run by hardcore communists, the other by stubborn military leaders. Both claim they're the real Germany, and both spend all their time spying on each other, plotting coups, and occasionally shooting across the border. France? Completely taken over by artists. Yes, really. Paris is ruled by people who care more about painting and poetry than laws. America goes off the rails, too. There's a HIPAA war. It's a long story, don't ask. Plus, states breaking off, new militias with 5-letter acronyms, and chaos in Washington. Australia is split in 2, with both sides convinced the other is a fake. The British Empire has fallen apart, and Africa, Asia, and the Middle East all have their own civil wars, revolutions, and oddball governments. The rules are simple. Survive, join a faction, and never trust anyone who says they have a plan. The wildest part about Red Flood is that every country ends up ruled by some meme, joke, or someone who read half a philosophy book and ran with it. You get everything, from cults of personality to straight-up Dadaist art groups. It's like a video game where every country is playing by its own rules, and nobody agrees on what winning looks like. The world is unstable. Borders change every month. Wars flare up. Peace breaks down, and no one ever really feels safe. Some places are so strange they barely function. Others are basically wild frontiers, with warlords and scavengers running the show. Diplomats travel with bodyguards and extra passports. Newspapers can't keep up with the news. For ordinary people, life is confusing and hard. The only constant is change. If you survive long enough to get used to one system, someone else takes over. There are no world powers, just 100 local nightmares, each more bizarre than the last. Red Flood is the definition of a butterfly effect gone wild. One stalled war, and the whole planet spins out of control. Every government is a wild experiment, and the world is always one step away from total meltdown. If you think history is weird now, this timeline laughs in your face and dares you to keep up. By the way, in the next entry, this World War I mess hits even harder for the US. Reds. Again, with the Hearts of Iron 4 mod. This time, imagine America, but the United States becomes a communist country, like Russia did in real life after World War I. After World War I, life in America is tough. Many workers are poor. People go on strike. Factories shut down. There are protests in the streets. In real life, the government stopped these protests, sometimes with violence. But in this timeline, the protests get bigger. The army fractures. Some soldiers side with the rich. Others join the revolution. No one knows who's in charge. After a lot of fights and chaos, the old government falls. The workers' revolution wins. America now calls itself the Union of American Socialist Republics. The new government promises fairness for everyone. There are no more private businesses. The government owns all the banks, stores, and factories. Rich people lose everything. Their money, land, and houses are taken by the state. There's a time called the Red Terror. The new leaders are afraid of anyone who might fight against them. People who speak out or are suspected of being enemies are sent to jail, or worse. Many old politicians and rich business owners run away to Canada or Europe. Everything changes, even little things. The American flag is now red with a new symbol. Money has new faces. Old songs and holidays are banned, and new ones are created. In school, students learn about Karl Marx, Lenin, and communism. They are taught that America is now a country for workers and farmers, not for the rich. Sports teams get new names, like Detroit Collective or San Francisco Reds. Famous movie stars and musicians must sing songs about workers and the party, or they disappear from the news. You don't choose where to live. You're assigned. No more private homes, just state-owned everything. You line up for food, clothes, and even toilet paper. Sometimes there isn't enough for everyone. The government keeps a close eye on everyone. Neighbors are told to report anyone who complains or doesn't join in the celebrations. The police and a new group called the Committee of Public Safety make sure people follow the rules. If you say the wrong thing, you can lose your job or disappear. There are posters everywhere showing smiling workers and warning against traitors. Other countries are shocked and scared. Canada closes its border. Some countries even try to fight the new America, hoping to bring it back to the old way. The US government supports communist groups in other places, hoping to spread the revolution. The Cold War still happens, but now it's America versus the rest of the world, not America against Russia. Some workers are thrilled, jobs, housing, and no more bosses. But most people struggle with ration books, paranoia, and vanished neighbors. Some are afraid to trust anyone, even their friends or family. Most days are about waiting in lines for food, going to government meetings, and watching what you say. You read newspapers full of stories about workers' heroes and warnings about enemies. If you get sick, you go to a government hospital. If you do well, you might win a medal at a parade. But life is gray, busy, and full of rules. Reds shows a world where everything is controlled by the government, and people have to be very careful. Some things are fairer, but freedom is gone. The dream of America is changed. Maybe forever. World War. Alright, time for one of the wildest what-if scenarios ever. What if World War II got interrupted by aliens? That's the idea behind World War by Harry Turtledove. You're in 1942. The world is already on fire. Nazis versus allies, tanks rolling, cities bombed out. Suddenly, spaceships land. Not just anywhere, but right in the middle of the war. The aliens are called the Race. They're lizard-like, walk on two legs, and come from a planet where things change slowly. Really slowly. They expect Earth to be easy to conquer. After all, their last invasion, on another planet, found nothing but people riding horses. The Race expects more of the same. A quick win, some paperwork, and then home in time for dinner. Big mistake. Instead of swords and bows, they find tanks, bombers, machine guns, and nations already fighting to the death. The Race's technology is ahead, but not by as much as they thought. Their ships and weapons are powerful, but their ideas about war are old and rigid. The humans, on the other hand, are desperate, clever, and used to chaos. As the invasion starts, old enemies suddenly have to work together. Americans, Soviets, British, Nazis, Japanese, even partisans and spies all over the world are forced to stop fighting each other and focus on not getting wiped out. Imagine Nazis and Soviets sharing a foxhole, still glaring at each other while blasting lizard men. The aliens grab huge chunks of territory fast, especially in Africa, South America, and Australia. But Earth's climate, diseases, and stubborn humans slow them down. The race didn't plan for snow, malaria, or soldiers willing to blow themselves up for a few more hours of freedom. Cities burn, armies melt away, but new resistance groups pop up everywhere. This is literally the indomitable human spirit story. Technology starts changing overnight. Humans capture alien gear and start copying it. Radios, lasers, and even atomic secrets. The war turns into a mess. Old tanks and new plasma guns. Soldiers and lizards. Spies everywhere. Chaos on every front. Nobody trusts anyone, not even their allies. Politics gets wild. Some make deals with the aliens. Others betray their own side for a seat at a new table. The Nazis don't suddenly become the good guys. And the allies have to make ugly choices. Survival comes first, and the old rules don't mean much anymore. As the series goes on, humans slowly adapt. The world becomes a strange mix of old and new. Some places have alien overlords. Others are lawless wastelands. The aliens, for their part, can't believe how fast humans change and fight back. They start to lose control, and their invasion turns into a long, grinding stalemate. And there you have it. We started with Nazi America and ended with alien lizards and mean governments. If you ever think our own timeline is a mess, just remember, it could always be Missouri with dinosaurs, or Paris run by painters. Reality's weird, sure, but at least we're not getting invaded by time-traveling Vikings or ruled by lizards in trench coats. At least, not yet. Thanks for sticking around through lizard invasions and hippo wars. It's nice knowing we're all falling down the same historical rabbit hole together. Also, if you guys had to pick any one of these to live in, which one would it be? And thank you again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. You can play it right now for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile. Just use my links in the pinned comment or video description. If you're new or returning on PC or console, you'll also unlock that limited time bonus pack with 3 premium vehicles. The Eagle of Valor Decorator, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium. Yes, still free. Yes, still very explodey. Go click the link and go blow something up. Legally.